I'm Paul Bogart. Uh, I have now retired after about 50 odd years in television and film, and Evening Primrose was one of the highlights of that stretch. Uh, I've done almost everything else you can think of. Starting in live television, I have extensive credits in live television and in tape television. And I actually stuck my foot into feature movies for a while, not with any great success, but some pleasure. And that brings me to where I am today, retired and happy to be retired. John Houseman, an estimable person who was the producer. And I guess it was he who offered me asked if I would be interested in doing it. And of course I was. Yeah, it was a bunch of heavy hitters there. There was James Goldman, and there was Houseman himself, and there was Tony Perkins, and last but not least, Stephen Sondheim, whose work I had seen and loved. And he was very young. I think he was in his mid-30s maybe, and I was about 10 years older. Uh, and he already had some heavy credits on his resume. He had West Side Story, he had Gypsy, and he had also done A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum all by himself, and it was wonderful. So he had big reputation already at his tender age, and I was anxious to work with him. Steve was warm, happy, welcoming. He was wonderful to work with. I wish I had I wish I'd been a little older. I would have known better how to capitalize on all that. But he was warm and affectionate and willing to do anything that would help. I adored him. I just thought, this is the smartest guy I ever saw in my life. And his music is such a knockout music to me. Of course, he hadn't written most of it yet. Just on a funny thing, the music and a funny thing, and what I knew of him, he was just so good at it. And I thought, I hope some of him rubs off on me because I could use that kind of gift. He was there, yes, all rehearsals, yes, absolutely. It was all music, he had to be. And during the shooting as well, when we shot at the department store, they were right there alongside the camera. When we got into the studio, he was in a viewing room, but he saw everything. He had some things he liked to say. He scared the hell out of me at one point by saying, when we were talking about camera work and camera coverage, he said he didn't care if the cuts were made against the music. Like, for instance, instead of cutting after every 4 bars or 8 bars, or cutting where the music rests momentarily, he cut anywhere. Well, that was so alien to me that I couldn't do it. And I didn't know how to do it. So I wish I'd investigated that further with him to have found out exactly what he had in mind. And there are things that I did in the show that I would never do today, or would never have done a year later, for that matter, which I didn't know how to handle. The bridge game, for instance. A wonderful piece of work combining an actual bridge game plus the internal thinkings of two of the people. And I tried to make it work on the screen, and I don't think it does. As a matter of fact, I think it doesn't. I would never this day, today, or as I say, a year later, would never go for the voiceover with the faces of the actors thinking what they're saying, which is not a very good thing because they get these silly expressions on their faces as they're trying hard to dredge up some feeling. And it's not good for them, and it doesn't serve the material well. There's no reason that they couldn't have just sung their thoughts during the scene, just sung them, and the bridge players just, we would have accepted the convention that the bridge players just don't hear them. That's all. It works in the theater. Why wouldn't it have worked on the screen? Anyway, that's where I think I failed there. There are a couple of places where I think I failed. I mean, a split screen, who would do that? Oh my God, the very thought. Anyway, I failed in a couple of places, and that was one of them. I know. When Charmian Carr sings "I Remember Snow," I had a choice. Tony is sitting there listening to her, and the convention at the time was to see the person who's listening every now and then. And all I could think of was Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald, where their faces are listening to their partners and they're living something. Anyway, I wasn't going to do that. I stayed on her face through the entire song. Did not cut to Tony at all, and I'm very proud of that because I think that the song deserved to be heard and watched uncut. And I think it serves the song well. So I did that right. I think he wanted to keep a tight hold on every word that he wrote. And I was ready to accept that as part of the penalty of doing the show. For instance, I know there was a place where Tony Perkins asked me if he could change a word, like instead of the, he would like to say and, something like that. It was just one little article. And so I said to Jim Coleman, can he do that change? And Jim said no. And Tony went, gnashed his teeth for a while, but went ahead and did it. Anyway, Jim had a tight hold on the words. And so my whole interest in it anyway was in the music. I loved it. I couldn't wait to get to rehearsal, to hear it. I memorized it all, you know. I wanted to hear more of it. I thought it was odd that when now Take Me to the World, I thought it was odd that he'd written a love duet in such an old pattern. It was the pattern of Rudolf Frimmel and all those Austrian people who wrote passionate love duets that climbed incredible heights and all that. And I thought, well, he's doing this for a reason, you know. The reason is that's the effect he wants. He wants that effect of two people in an operetta. And that's what he got. I don't think he did that. He's very good at that pastiche stuff. For instance, he writes in any number of styles. Follies is full of it, and Pacific Overtures. and is full of various different kinds of music, all of which he's borrowed from other people and altered to fit his patterns. I just had nothing but respect for his talent, and so does a good deal of the theatrical world. We pre-recorded everything so that in case they lost their voices on the day, we would have a backup. Also, we could then do playback as we had to, as I knew we would have to in certain places where the shot was just too wide to cover Tony with a good microphone. And I didn't trust those little ones that you stuck on your chest then, and they're much better now, of course. Oh, it was all playback. All that music had been done in the studio. We gathered, I guess it was a week before or some little time before we commenced shooting. We had a recording session with this little orchestra, and it was then that I discovered that the sound was what I thought was weak. But it was too late to do anything about it. You know, you're committed to the studio, to the musicians. Everybody's getting paid, and it's too late to do anything about it. So we were committed to that. Yes, we recorded it on 2 tracks. The orchestra had several tracks, and the singers had their tracks, and so that we could separate them. And so we went in with everything. It was my way to get everything done just in case, and then to try to make people sing for real, alive, as Charmian does in I Remember Snow, you know, and Tony does and all the other stuff. It's all recorded live, except for the backgrounds. Well, I broke it down to logical places. You know, I didn't cut in the middle of anything. I was scared of that, as I said. But, and I rehearsed with Tony, you know, each section. And there was no, I mean, I don't remember any arguments about anything. Tony was wonderful in that. First of all, he had a very sweet voice. I didn't know that at the time, but he had some Broadway singing experience. But he had a beautiful, pure voice and an excellent memory, and he had such good movie experience, and he knew how to lip sync like anybody could, you know, better than anybody could. And the first few words out of his mouth, I think, are lip syncing. Am I alone and unobserved, or whatever those lines are. I think those are lip sunk. And so he was very good. There was a lot of walking around and movement, a lot of movement. I think he lip synced to the whole thing. Tony reminded me of that a couple of years later when we did a session at the Los Angeles County Museum where we screened the picture and then had a question and answer period, or the other way around, with the audience. And he said he remembered that I went to him and I said, should I look right into the camera while I sing these things? And I had an aversion to being stared at by newsmen and talking heads. I didn't like the way they looked at me. Don't look at me. And I have always tried to avoid having an actor look into the lens. This, of course, was different. He was addressing the audience. He was looking right at them. He was telling them his story. He had to. I didn't. I was torn. I didn't know what to do. So I said, "Ask Steve." I wanted Steve to get what he wanted anyway. So he did ask Steve, who said, "Look to the left, just to the right of the camera," which Tony said he did, and it made him look crazy. And he never did like that, and he blamed me for it. But that's life. Tony had only recently got a few years before he had a big success with Psycho. He he told me that when he'd worked for Orson Welles in the trial, that Welles had told him that he was the best cinema actor he'd ever worked with, and he was very proud of that. But I don't think he thought I was in their class, nor did I think that. So that's all. He was good. He wasn't difficult to work with. I didn't get much warmth, if that's what you mean. I got a lot more from Charmian. In just ordinary commerce. Tony came with it. He was part of it. And I think Stickney was part of the package. I can't remember. But the others, Charmian Carr was the result of a search for a young girl who could sing well enough to fulfill the needs of the music. And she was delightful, sweet, sweet girl. And she really had a lot to do. Steve's not easy for some singers. And she really worked at it. I really have nothing but respect and affection for her. And I wonder where she is today. Yeah. I think she just left show business after that. Figured it was too hard. Larry Gates was an old friend, and I'd used him many times. So he turned up there, and that's it. David Shire was the rehearsal pianist, and I was so taken with his work. He did all that sequence of the dark men chasing our hero and heroine through the store. Uh, Steve allowed him to make some kind of a musical chase sequence out of it, and he did drums and things like that. It was very exciting, and it was a very congenial group, I must say. I would say we rehearsed for a couple of weeks. I can't remember for real. And I kept none of the paperwork, so I can't say for sure. But I would say, what with it being music and all, that we had at least a 10-day rehearsal. That's my guess. We had a deal with Macy's to shoot there. So as a starting exercise, I went out with a camera, film camera. We hid it in a tall building on Herald Square so we could shoot down and see the entry to Macy's and the little park across the street from it. And I had Tony go and sit in that little park nervously, which he did. People would sometimes walk by and say, they'd recognize him, and he'd say, "Keep going, keep going, keep going. I'm working, I'm working." Anyway, he was cued then to get up, walk across the street, and enter Macy's, and we covered that. And then we went inside. I don't know if we shot anything else outside. I just can't remember anymore. Oh, I must have done that several different ways, you know, starting tight, going wide, going in, you know, stuff like that. And then we went inside the store, and I did several takes of Tony wandering around through the mob. And we just kind of stole that. We let the patrons move around at will. And we did some of that, and then I don't remember what else. Then Macy's decided they'd had enough of us, I think. And we suddenly didn't have Macy's. So we got an agreement from Stearns, a fine department store which is no longer there, on 42nd Street between 5th and 6th. And they got us approval to shoot there after working hours, after their working hours. So we did that for 2 nights. I think it was 2 nights. I might be wrong. That's my recollection. Tony says it was only one, but I think he's wrong, or was wrong. And that's where we moved, and we shot the opening stuff. You can see, for instance, how we go from film that we shot on location to the studio when Tony walks out of one shot and into another, which was on the stage, a shot of the thing that he's hiding in, that little gazebo thing. So they were very nice. They left everything for us to see. They didn't worry about us stealing anything, and I don't think we did. Well, everything in the store, of course, you can see, including, of course, those escalators, which I used often. It maybe too much, but they were kind of thrilling. And wherever you see big expanses of store, that's the real store. When you get to Tony's working area and the internal stuff where they go from layout to the bookstore, that's all on a stage. We were very pressed for time. At the very end, on the very last day of shooting, we were so busy, I was so busy trying to get the last few takes in that would help to explain what's happening. Just to explain what's happening, I didn't want anything more than that. I wanted the audience to understand what happened to these two young people after they tried to escape from the store. So I was shooting away doggedly, trying to get those last few shots. We ran over in the studio, and there was another show waiting to load in. They kept saying, "Get out, get out." Houseman kept coming and saying, "We've got to get out of here. We got to get out. We got to get out." And I'd say, "Yes, sure, okay." And trying doggedly to get those last few shots, I would try to ignore the pressure. Well, I had nothing but respect for him. He'd been uh, seminal in the theater. His background on the stage was impeccable. His relationship with Orson Welles, I mean, just was revolutionary, all the stuff that they did together. So I had a lot of respect for him, and I really liked him a lot. And later on, I directed him as an actor in some projects that I did. And I found him, he was a lovely man. He was also, yeah, there was one time when we were shooting, I was blocking something on camera with our leading players. and the audio man was going through his available effects. They always did that. Sometime during the day they would run through what they had: telephone voices, foggy voices, echoes, all that sort of stuff. And I was working and I wasn't paying any attention to them because I knew that's what they do. They do that when they feel they've got a minute and they're working on it, right? But uh, Hausman and Sondheim, I think, were terribly alarmed when they heard their singers singing in telephone voices. Those little high telephone voices. And John came storming into the control room, shouting, "You can't do this, you can't do this. Or you can't do this, you can't do this. I won't, I am unalterably opposed to this." I said, "What? What is that sound, that awful sound?" And I don't know if he understood when I explained to him that I wasn't planning on using that it was just the sound man going through his bag of tricks. But that was the biggest reaction I got from John Houseman during the whole thing, on a mistake. It was a series that they started, I think, in '66. It went from '66. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I did a few of them. It was totally unlike any of the others. The others were television playlets written by very good people about important things, some of them. And then along came Evening Primrose, which was the only musical that they did that I know of. That seems to have been that ABC's biggest move into original television, because that was all original work that we did. The other one I did for them was written by Ellen Violet, a wonderful story about how people live beyond their means and will never get ahead of it. And Dustin Hoffman was in that, There were good people in those. Well, I started, as I say, in live television. And in the late 50s, tape arrived, which was a big thing, because suddenly you could make mistakes and didn't have to be stuck with them. Except you were at first, I'm sorry, because there was no way of editing videotape. And so at first we used to have to do entire shows, beginning to end, that were recorded from one end to the other, and then put away till they were put on the air. That was a big convenience to studios, because then their schedules could be moved around. They didn't have to be on the air at certain times. So as I say, tape came in, and the first tape show that I did was Three Sisters, the actor studio version, with all those people. And they allowed one to edit from black to black. So that, because if you made an edit, which was an L-shaped edit, because the sound was here and the picture was there, don't ask me. If you made that kind of an edit, the picture would lose power at that moment, and there'd be a glitch. One of those things would happen. So they tried to avoid that by making you edit only from black to black, so that if there was a glitch there, nobody would pay much attention. Then I invented ways of getting around that. I would pan the camera into black during a scene, cut right there, and pick up from where I left off in black, and then continue as though I'd passed by a piece of furniture. so that then I could edit interior to scenes. And it wasn't until about, I'm trying to remember the year, it's sometime, some years later, that they came up with the big advance in editing tape, which was electronic editing, where you fed a picture into a machine and then stopped there, fed another. You never physically cut the tape. You just fed it into a machine that copied it. And you could then move the cut from place to place. It was wonderful. But also, some life went out of live television because you could then make mistakes and they weren't on the air for all the world to see. So that removed a great deal of risk and a lot of fun. We used to laugh a lot about terrible things that happened. It became safe. Tape made television safe the way film made the theater safe. Oh, I think they'll look at it and say, "What is this? I can't see this, Mommy. Why is it so dark? And what are they singing?" I don't think I don't think that most television audiences would know what to make of it. Listen, in my early days, the networks fought for prestige too. NBC had the NBC Opera, on which I worked considerably as a floor manager, and the NBC Symphony, and they were both unsponsored programs, and they took up a lot of airtime. On the other hand, I also did, I think it was with CBS, The Ages of Man with John Gielgud. 2 hours of one man reciting pieces of Shakespeare, prime time. Can you imagine that happening today? There's no way they would do it. But they were both after prestige. They knew that they needed some of that so that they could justify putting on some of the other crap. I think the answer to that is Steve Sondheim. I think he has shot so far up into the stratosphere with his work that everybody's interested in everything he ever did. And this is something he ever did. It's small, but it's choice. People have been wanting to see this for years now. They've been copying their friends' copies at the Museum of Broadcasting. I'm told that this is the one show everybody asks for, or at least they have the most requests for this show. People want to see it, and I think it's on account of Steve and the talent that he's brought to it, and where he's gone and all that.